Monsieur Anber.
Monsieur Cassavant.
Good
Good
evening.
evening, sir.
Good evening. Oh, I think I have it also nearby, the mug. Give me a second.
Good. Have to reach for that as a reminder. Salute. Indeed.
There you go.
Yeah.
And I've been back after a week hiatus due to vacation time, a little bit of vacation time. So that will be the last hiatus we have here on the podcast for the foreseeable future. Now, at the time of recording this, you're going soon to Belfast, I believe, correct?
Very excited. One of my all-time favorite cities in the world. I love Belfast, and it's been over 2 years since I've been there. And it was at Falls Park where they held the outdoor show where over 10,000 people were in attendance. And I'm hoping that that's what they're shooting for this time. And spoke to Jamie Conlon, and he said, tickets have sold out almost instantaneously. And I'm very excited. And I think the beauty of all this is that it's going to be an all Irish matchup. So it's not like they're bringing in somebody from the outside. It's a Conlon, in an all Irish matchup. And I'm very excited about former world champion. His name escapes me now. I had it on the tip of my tongue. And then
I'll take a look at who the opponent for Mick Conlon is. Mick Conlon's a quick turnaround for him. Wasn't that long ago that you were in the UK for his debut at 122 pounds?
When was that? That was in March, I believe. I believe that was March.
I'll take a quick look here, but I know that he fought a fight that ended up being kind of a tough, rugged opponent. And he said, the adjustment at 122. So people look forward as he eventually gets to a title shot to see kind of his development and maybe another fight at 122.
Wait, I said March. No, it was April. It was April. And then I was supposed to travel on to
it was end of April. Yeah. It was April 30th. So that's why I said we're talking about exactly 3 months almost to the day where he'll be fighting.
Perfect. That's what he needs to do. Fighters need to fight. And,
right.
He had a good fight, keeps coming in. He needs to test his new weight class. He needs to get used to it. So I think it's a great move. And the beauty about him, and this is the great thing about working with fighters like this, is that, working with fighters that sell out their hometown to big numbers it's the best. Like, it's the guaranteed success to boxing, and, you're not struggling and fighting in obscurity. You're fighting at home. And I'm really excited about going there. And it's a great fight crowd. We know the Irish history of boxing, how rich that is. I mean, you'd have to think that, the Irish history of boxing has to be as rich, if not as glorious, if you will, as the Mexican history, so it's
and it's going to be interesting. He's fighting TJ Donaghy, who's also an Irish fighter, as you said, and both are coming off the same opponent in Inut Baluta in their last fights. We'll get to that next week. Of course, we'll have an opportunity while you're there to discuss a bit more of that fight in depth and some of the other action in the ring. On this podcast, we'll get to the Canelo news. Will he be fighting Caleb Plant? Will he be fighting someone else? Will Terence Crawford and Sean Porter meet in what could be the biggest bout, of course, in terms of welterweight marquee names for Terence Crawford? And we'll also get to some drug testing issues that, Russ, I think you want to bring up a bit later, which I think will intrigue a lot of the people tuning in. So thank you again for tuning in to Calling Russ Anber, another edition here on YouTube. But Mr. Anber, the first thing I want to get to, because it's, of course, much of the topic of the sports world right now, are, their eyes are viewed towards the Olympic Games in Tokyo. And Mick Conlon, who's fighting next week and who you work with in the corner as a cutman, he was involved in a lot of the controversy, probably maybe the lasting image of the 2016 Olympics when he flipped off the bird to the judges in Aiba after what many felt was one of the most lopsided and robberies, if you will, in amateur boxing, at least in the Olympic boxing of the 2016 games. So there's no shortage of topics. And let me ask you, though, as somebody how many games did you attend or call for CBC over the years?
6.
Starting,
I'm what they call a veteran of 6 Olympic Games. So yeah,
and that started with the Roy Jones games, right? I believe
1988. Roy Jones, Lennox Lewis, Egerton Marcus, best Canadian team we've ever fielded. And after that Olympics, Canada was ranked number 10 in the world. Now think about that, in the world. That's a
30 years ago.
Massive rank. What's that?
A little bit more than 30 years ago, and since then, I don't know. What exactly, do you even know how to determine world rankings based on country at this point?
Well, I'm assuming, like, I've been out of amateur boxing now for what, over 5 years now, maybe more. And I think there's actually more, because I didn't do 2016, so that's been 5 years. So it was my last Olympics that I did was 2012, was the London Games.
Right.
So you know, I'm assuming the logical way of determining rankings of countries would be by their performance at the major international tournaments, whether it be the Olympic Games, World Championships, continental qualifiers, etc. So, you know, usually that would make sense, that how you would determine rankings of a team would be based on the results that they bring forth. So, and you know, you mentioned Mick Conlan in 2016. For all intent and purposes, Mick Conlan, that famous photo, you can find it online, of him, you know, with his two hands extended, you know, flipping off the judges, like you said, changed amateur boxing. It brought down AIBA as we knew it. You know, heads rolled. The IOC threatened to remove it from boxing. They actually took it over at one point, if memory serves correctly, you know, that it had to be under their rules. Corruption was found out. Judges were dismissed, gotten rid of, disgraced, you know, and he did that single-handedly. You know, he changed the face of amateur boxing, changed the scoring system, you know, like everything. He upset AIBA completely, you know, and they talk about the Conlan Revolution. That's where the revolution started, you know, and he upset the apple cart there, and rightfully so. It took a long time to do so. We went from you know, I've seen the debacles that have gone on in amateur boxing, from Roy Jones, you know, maybe the worst decision ever rendered,
well, at least in terms of a gold medal performance.
Yeah,
right?
I was going to say, in a high profile fight, that basically changed how amateur boxing was going to be scored for the next 25 years or more. They brought in the computer scoring system. Amateur boxing went through an ebb and flow of ups and downs, of fighters winning 2-1, you know, after 5 rounds of 2-minute rounds, you know, they were winning by scores of 2-1, you know, no points being scored, nothing, to like ridiculous points of, you know, 38-32, and like it was just off the charts of the way they were scoring. And I'm happy at least that it's gone back to the boxing we're more accustomed to seeing, one that resembles more of pro boxing. And it just goes to show you how, you know, the mistakes and the decisions made by humans, politically motivated just to hurt people and show power, you know, disrupted an entire sport and almost removed it from the Olympic Games, and probably to a degree still does that, you know, at some level, whether it's local level, at the international level, at the national level. There's always that power tripping corruption that occurs, which leaves such a sour and bitter taste in my mouth and renders the previous 25 years obsolete. You know, it's like it's like amateur boxing, for whatever reason, because of always the change in personnel, it's like we keep starting from point zero each time, you know, like you keep starting over. With 25 years of teaching guys to fight with the computer scoring system, throw that out, remove the headgears, another genius move, right? Like that was going to make a difference, right? Remove the headgears, proving again, you don't care about the athletes. You know, your concern is not that they have to fight 4 times, 5 times, very close to each other. You don't care that it's righty southpaw, that they could get hit. It's not like they're fighting today and then they don't fight again for 2 months. They're fighting in 2 days or 3 days, whatever. And you know, you're taking the headgear off them to please yourself, to make it.
Is it all fighters who are taking the headgear off in the Olympics? Because I've seen fights where the headgear is on.
The women. Only the women.
Only the women.
Only the women wear headgear.
Another rule that kind of is inconsistent, right? Whether it's the rounds, how long they last, and how the women need the headgear, but the men don't for whatever reason.
It's that, to me, is one of the best moves that was ever done was the implementation of the headgear, because the implementation of the competition headgear never took away from the action or potential knockouts, because it doesn't do that. You get hit on the chin, you're going. When Mark Breland was at his best, knocking everybody out, when the Cubans knocking everybody out, they're wearing headgear. It didn't matter.
Mike Tyson, we see a lot of footage, of course, of him winning by knockout with headgears on.
But you had almost 0.001,000% of lacerations bigger than a centimeter, you know, that could be quantified as a cut, you know, like it was. And now it happens all the time, whether it's cheekbone fractures, whether it's lacerations, southpaw righty, headbutts get in there, you know it's going to happen, not to mention whatever swelling could occur from headbutts and stuff that are completely avoidable and take away nothing from the sport. Nothing. It doesn't take away from the action, doesn't take away from anything. So proving once again, you don't care. You don't care about the athletes. They fight for free and they can go home with a cut and scar tissue, and you don't care.
Wasn't there a report at some point that the argument was they found that the headgears did lead to more concussions? Wasn't that kind of the basis for their decision, if I remember correctly?
That's what they say. I don't buy into that. I don't believe that. USA Boxing did. I was talking to the director of USA Boxing the other night, and he brought up studies that they did at their national tournament, of which the US might have more boxing than anywhere in the world, and compared that to the numbers of who's getting knocked out and how many concussions are being suffered. And I think his number was in the US, they suffered 6 concussions over, I think he named 1,200 bouts or something like that. And at international competition, in something like 300 bouts, they suffered 3 concussions, you know? So like the numbers don't jive. There's no truth to that. It's impossible. It's an actual impossibility that you're going to make me believe that not having a headgear leads to less concussions. It's impossible.
I think one of the reasons why you can even argue that point, Russ, to say that it doesn't lead to less concussions not having the headgear, because every professional fighter who's in training camp always wears a headgear. So if the headgear could lead to more concussions, why would all the pro guys be wearing the headgears for training camps or sparring sessions? So somewhere along the line, they probably made a decision for marketability purposes. I'm not entirely sure, right? Because they see the faces are more recognizable without the headgears. Because what point do you recall the headgears being back on, like in the amateur days? Because there must have, and I think in the 70s, they weren't wearing headgears.
They were not wearing, 76 did not wear headgear. 80 was the Moscow Olympics that the Western world didn't go to, and they did not wear headgear. Then 84. By 84, it was mandatory, because in 80, just after 80 and then 81, it became mandatory that you had to wear the headgear. And Canada was funding was going to be taken away from boxing if the headgear wasn't implemented. And they implemented the headgear in early 80s. It became mandatory to wear. And Matthew, like I said, absolutely 100% with the leather soft foam headgear that exists, while reducing impact to a varying degree, but probably not enough to say there's a difference when you're getting hit, you know, at full power. When you get hit on the chin, though, it doesn't matter if you have the headgear on or not. There's no padding there.
The mouthpiece that's going to at least maybe help you out a little one.
Correct. But the shot on the temple, you know, so now you've got this much padding in the glove plus this much padding on the headgear, you know, could reduce the impact a little bit. You're pulling away from a shot, could take away that tail end off, but it's okay. It's amateur boxing. It's okay even if it takes a little bit off, it's okay. Yep. But the fact that you have cuts and that you're fighting for free and you should be subject. And when you think about it, think about this. I don't know if you've watched any of the Taekwondo or anything that's at the Olympics, right?
Well, in previous years, yeah, sure.
They've got full headgear and a chest protector on. You know, they're fully equipped and they only touch for points. So it's okay to do it for that sport, but it's not okay to do it for boxing and leave the headgear on. And you're talking about the identity. That's another thing they said, like you mentioned, oh, it's for the identity. Matthew, that's another load of bollocks as well. It's garbage, because if that was true, they would let the fighters fight in their country's colors, but they don't. They strip them of all identity. They strip them of all individuality. They put them in red and blue, and they don't allow you to fight in your colors. You don't come out with, you know, Jamaican black and gold. You don't come out with Canada red and white. You don't see the Americans in their red, white, and blues. You know, you're proudly representing their country. No, we're stripping you of that identity. You're allowed to put 3 letters on the jersey, which says CAN or USA, whatever the abbreviation would be for your country. and you wear red and blue. We don't want to give you an identity. You're red and blue. And that bothers me a lot, the stripping of people like that of their identity, that they could be proud, and be wearing their uniform, their singlet on them, And so I don't buy none of that garbage, none of that crap about, they don't care about the fighters. They don't care about him as an individual. They don't care about him for his health. They don't care about him, about his identity and who he represents. You're a red or blue. That's it. We don't care anymore about you. Okay, you don't wear a headgear. Great. Now you're allowing me to get hit, maybe get cut. And you never know. It only takes one bad cut that could make this a problem for the rest of your career. And that shouldn't be. That should not be.
Yeah, it's a very good point. There's a lot of angles we can go with this. At the moment we're talking now, recording this, in the Canadian team, 5 Olympians qualified, 4 women, 1 man. And there's 1 woman remaining in Tamara Thibault, who's advancing to the quarterfinals in the middleweight division. Everyone else has been eliminated in their respective bouts without any medals. And I don't know, Russ, do you think with the changing of the point system, we'll see an advancement eventually with Canadian teams producing amateur Olympians that can have professional careers to a success? Because a lot of the former Canadian Olympians of the last decade or so, maybe even more, they haven't gone on to have excellent pro careers. I can think even of Castillo Clayton now, who's trying to get into the rankings slowly but surely, but still relatively up there. Simone Keane is in the Canadian heavyweight mix, not yet on the international level. And you look at guys like Adam Trupish 1 year, who I think was the sole representation for Canada, did not have much of success in the professional ranks. Do you think that maybe this new system will lead to a barometer of things to come, because they theoretically have an opportunity to market themselves more than the regular amateur who's turning pro because of the fact they went to the Olympics? Do you think we'll see more like, okay, this guy's going to the Olympics, we can pretty much be sure he's going to be a blue chip professional prospect? I'm not seeing that as the case right now in Canadian boxing.
I'm scared to answer your question. I'm really...
No, but wait, before you could have argued that it was the point system made it difficult to say, because this style is so amateurish, it's not going to translate into the professional ranks. But now we've had this change for a few years of having it more like a traditional scoring system that's similar to the professional ranks. Can something happen? We know you've been vocal in the past of how you're very pessimistic when it comes to the amateur scene in Canadian boxing and how it's going to evolve or not. But do you think that some of the talent we're seeing now, or some of the talent we'll see going forward, is going to say, you know what, we have a better chance of thinking that one's a blue chip professional prospect? Because you see it in other countries, whether it's Lomachenko that you work with, whether it's Conlon we talked about, they were blue chip Olympians and they ended up being very good professionals.
Matthew, the problem with Canada's success in the ring doesn't lie with its athletes. It lies with its structure of its program. It lies with the way they promote the program. It lies with lack of development of coaches. It lies with putting your priorities in the wrong places. We have totally, the fact that we had 5 total Olympians, 4 women, 1 man from Canada is a disgrace. It's not, I can't even, I'm so disgusted with it. Not to mention that you had fighters like a Joshua Fraser, who was named the best boxer in Canada, who had to, was kicked off the Canadian team. They didn't give him his just due, and he had to go to try to represent Jamaica, and for all intent and purposes qualified for an Olympic place, for an Olympic spot for Tokyo. But when the Olympics were moved because of the pandemic and they went back and took the qualifiers of the previous year or whatever, the guy he had beaten ended up going instead of Joshua. But that just goes to show you the talent was there. And we politically, again, like Canada has done so often in the past, has politically just ruined its team, ruined the fighters, tried to be all about power and control. And this is the end result of it. This is the end result. Even for this trip, even for this Olympic team, having 4 women on the team and not having a female coach, I'm wondering how that even makes sense. And how do you name an athlete as a team manager of the team? That's one of the team managers, a fighter who did not qualify, and was named team manager. How that was allowed to pass among the coaches and officials in Canada is beyond me. So I don't know what to even say about that. I wish I knew more about it to be able to offer even more be more vocal about it.
Well,
But
you were involved.
My heaven, it stinks.
But because you were involved for a long, long time in amateur boxing in this country, right? And that was the first. That's how you made your bones for a long time.
I'm sorry?
It's how kind of your identity. You were known more as an amateur boxing coach, and the program and the guys were able to qualify for the Olympics or even for the top national tournaments, whether it was the Grand Brothers, of course, at a, in the 80s, but or the maybe even the early 90s. But you haven't been involved much in amateur boxing in this country as you once did, much more focused on the professional ranking. So maybe there's things like you're saying that it's tougher for you to comment on because you're not involved in it as much as you used to be.
Yeah, but even when I was there and I served for 10 years, even being a coach and having, had 4 Olympians myself, had success in the amateur ranks and watched Canada as a whole have success internationally, be it against the Americans or the Cubans, whatever. We competed with them, didn't always win, but we were there. We were there. We had, we were expected to win at the Commonwealth Games in '86. We I think out of 12 categories, 11 categories, we had 6 gold medalists from the '86 team in the Commonwealths. We were like, Canada was like the Cuba of the Commonwealth.
And which is, for those maybe who don't follow it as much, what exactly is the difference with the Commonwealth Games?
What do you mean?
What is the Commonwealth Games compared? Like, how many countries are involved compared to the Olympics?
All the British Commonwealth, everybody, all the UK, Australia, all former British.
Quality. I'm saying you had quality involved.
Of course you did. Of course you did. But all these countries stepped up their program and said, we're losing on the international scene. They hired coaches. They went out and got people. They educated themselves. They restructured their program. They reinvested in the program. They put money into it. They built coaches. They built fighters. They gave them incentives to work. They gave them training centers. All that. This is now being done here, and it's all being kept in a little part and parcel for just a select few people, and it's all political. It's not about winning. All the coaches sit back. They don't say anything. No one, okay, that's what it was said. Okay. No one does anything. It's not the fact that Canada has this kind of representation. One male from the country that produced Lennox Lewis, Egerton Marcus, Ray Downey, Howard Grant, all it has one guy again after going through the Adam Troupish debacle, and we did nothing to improve on that. I was there for 10 years. I watched it happen. I watched it crumble. And one of the things that I had said when I was with the board of directors, and I remember telling Robert Crate, who was the executive director at the time, Matt Mazursky, God rest his soul, he understood what it was internationally, what you needed to do. Adrian Teodorescu, God rest his soul, he knew what was needed to be done to succeed internationally, but no one ever paid them any attention. It was all about the political struggle going on in Canada. Who's going to get the most votes? Who's going to be president? Who's going to be vice president? Who's going to get the trip, as a team manager to go somewhere? That was their concern. Who's going to control the committee that made up Boxing Canada? That was what they were interested in. And, it's so sad that has come to that today, because I remember telling Robert Crate, I said, imagine Boxing Canada is like a building on a piece of property. The building has been neglected. We can't keep fixing the building, but the property on which it lays is very nice and very fruitful and can be great. I said, it's time to destroy that building and rebuild from the ground up, rebuild the program, re-educate everybody on boxing. But they didn't want to listen to me. And that after that time, when I realized all the corruption that was going on provincially and whatnot, I decided I needed to be out of this. I could no longer give of myself to an organization that was just so slow in change and making things better and holding vendettas and grudges. And their last concern was the athletes. The last concern was the athletes, and I don't want to be a part of that.
What about also the fact that boxing is such an individual sport, and with the coaches and the relationships they build in the gym, but compared to, like, let's say hockey, it's a team sport. You can go into play for a coach who's not your day-to-day coach in your own league. and it can kind of work more so, I believe, than in boxing. It's a bit difficult probably as well for a fighter grows in a gym with a specific coach, certain style, and then he has to go for a long time, I believe, up until the Olympic Games with another coach who's representing the entire country of Canada, right? Isn't that also sometimes make it difficult where it's not his fighter per se that he's coaching, but they've been brought to this level, but then he takes over and tries to win a medal with them, but they don't have the same necessarily report that the individual coach would have with the fighter. Do you think that's an issue or not?
Well, that Matthew, that's partly an issue. I don't think it's the be all and end all. I think if we look at the success of fighters in Canada that have succeeded internationally, a lot of them did it without their personal coach being in the corner. But if you have a great national coach, someone who, I mean, I have to give credit. I'll say this. When in 1986, might have been, I told you, was Canada's best performance at the Commonwealth Games. Its second best performance was 1994. So right up until the mid 90s, Canada was still a powerhouse in boxing. And Yvon Michel was the head coach of the Canadian team. Yvon understood how to group the coaches together, how to get everybody working for a common goal. In French, you give me what the English translation is, but in French, he was a great rassembleur.
Yeah. So I understand what you mean, like a rally, somebody who could rally men together.
Rally the guys together. So even the personal coaches felt good working under him. Everyone worked for a common goal to produce the best fighters and the best team that we had. And that's important. I think, when you have good personal coaches that are producing talent, a good head coach will make that talent work, and the fighter will make it work. And you prepare your fighter as best as you can when you send them to the training camp. If you don't go, if you're not selected on the team, or you go and you want to help out and you're there and you understand that the head coach is the head coach and he's calling the shots. But because of the political struggles that have gone on, we refuse to do that. It was all more about egos than anything else. And now maybe worse than it's ever been. The results are worse. The quality of fighters we're producing is the lowest it's ever been. Like it's just.
Are you sure it's not due though to the fact that maybe the rest of the world and these things go in cycles has really kind of improved, and that's maybe why it's more difficult now than ever?
Of course, we're either not. I don't want to even say stagnating, because we're not. We're going down further, and the rest of the world is moving up ahead because they're investing. The Brits in 2000 in Australia.
Yeah.
The lone representative was Audley Harrison.
Right.
And the Brits said never again. From 2000, they went from one representative to how many gold medals in 2012?
Well, it was also their home games, right? Well, they had quite a few.
I'm just saying, in a 12-year span, they went from one representative to how many gold medals, be it their games or not, they produced.
I forgot how many, but Joshua, I think, was one of them. So
of course, Joshua, Luke Campbell was there, James DeGale. There was a good gold medal performance from the Brits. In a short period of time, they went from didn't even figure on the landscape to gold medal performances 12 years later. They got it done in time. They built a program, produced the athletes, and got the gold medals. So
Joshua and Campbell won, but then you also had a few others involved in the finals and medaled, whether it was Anthony Ogogo, Fred Evans, etc.
Correct. So, the point was they built the program. We failed to do that. We got rid of everybody. We eliminated people. Even somebody like Rob McCracken, worked with the amateur team to build the team and was a successful pro. Here in Canada, we don't allow you to do that. You're not allowed to be involved. It's insane. Like there's few people as it is in boxing, and what do? We kick them out. We kick out the ones who are lifers and who want to be in the sport, and we don't use them. And it's sad. It's very sad. We make sure, whether at whatever level you're talking about, that our administrators get paid, and then whatever happens, they don't care. Oh, the technical director gets paid, this guy gets paid. Okay, they get their salaries. What do they produce? And that's what they've produced right now. So it sickens me actually when you look at the history of boxing in Canada and how far we came, because money got invested after Canada's dismal performance in 76 because we were a host and didn't win. Canada had a certain amount of success internationally, not great, but they said, this is bad. We can't keep doing this. But because of the Olympics and the money that was generated, money was put into the program, and, you know, associations came up. We had Boxing Canada, you know, everything started to be created. Boom, boom, boom. From 76, we went from 76. By the time we got to 88, you know, Canada was a powerhouse. And even before 88, because it started to do actually 84, you know, when 80, when Sean O'Sullivan and Willie DeWitt emerged. You know, I mean, these were great fighters that we produced, and the program was strong, and Canada was building it. But like in most things, we get to a point where we think we're king of the hill, right? We're king of the hill, all right? We're good. And now you don't want to keep going. You don't keep maintaining that.
Complacency sets in.
Of course it does. And that's exactly what happened. And when complacency sets in, politics set in. And when politics set in, that's a recipe for disaster.
We'll move on to the professional ranks in a second here. But before we go, I know something else that's not related to boxing, but related to the Olympics and related to performance in general, caught your attention, and it caught pretty much the sports world's attention with Simone Biles, the U.S. gymnast, who, of course, has a big time attention, recognition, one of the best of all time. And she couldn't perform to one of the performances that she was expected to. And she used mental health explanation, similar to what Naomi Osaka in tennis did for pulling out of Wimbledon. And I know that you had some thoughts on not this, are amateur athletes in the case of Simone Biles, but they're supposed to be elite level athletes, kind of opening up this mental health issue that we haven't heard much of in the past, and it's getting much more mainstream attention now than ever before.
Matthew, I'm obviously, you know, medically not qualified, but I'm a human, and I have common sense. And, you know, at what point is something not mentally healthy? At what quantifies when maybe it's just from a different era, but when you quantified mental health in the past, it was related to someone who basically couldn't take care of himself, couldn't be counted on to make the best decisions for himself, was troubled, you know, that showed in everyday life. It wasn't just for an event. It wasn't just for, you know, a sport that they're in. And now it just seems like everything is being, I don't know if it's an excuse or whatever it is, but this is the part and parcel of what it takes to be an elite athlete in any sport at any level. And that's dealing with these pressures and dealing with the failures that come with it. They always say about dare to be great. Well, dare to be great, and you might fail, and it's okay. It's okay. It's not because you fail and you didn't do it doesn't make you any less of a person, but you fail. And the greats, they succeed and they make it, and they thrive under that type of pressure. So I don't know how that becomes a mental health issue. I might be missing something. I don't want to, it's such a delicate subject to speak on now. I don't know. I don't know enough about why Simone Biles pulled out, you know, after arguably being the greatest American gymnast that they've had, to pull out of the finals without, you know, because of a bad, I think I saw her do a flip or whatever on the pommel horse. Was it on the pommel horse, the vault?
Oh, it's a good question. I'm not going to go and confirm the gymnast is. I'm a boxing guy, not a gymnast guy.
Right. And, you know, pulled out and citing that her mental health is more important than competing. What is it? My question then is, what is it that is damaging in your mental health? Should you compete? What
social media has added an extreme layer of, they create this tension and this added pressure, right? That they feel because they are always connected to people, whether they want to or not. I'm sure that has something to do with it, but part of being, like you said, an elite athlete, especially them, they've been accomplished before. They've succeeded before. So now, of course, they're expected to succeed again. That adds a layer of pressure to the expectation, but that's what makes you an elite athlete. If you're able to, because mere humans or even regular athletes, that's usually something they can overcome, that pressure, right? That's what separates them from the great. And there's probably, I don't know if this is going to open now, or could we see other athletes in professional sports, maybe team sports less likely, but maybe individual sports say, it's the fourth round at Augusta. I'm not feeling good now because I'm seeing all the pressure. I'm pulling out for mental health reasons. Like, I don't know if that's something that is going to be part of the times, but to me, it's a little bit bizarre, the signal sometimes that's sending. But as you stated, it's a complicated matter. There's maybe more so at play, but I agree with a lot of the sentiment that you've expressed.
I'm really trying to wrap my head around it, Matt. I don't get it. Athletes perform. Whether it be, I mean, imagine. Although I'm not I'm not a fan of soccer, but the pressure that soccer players are under in performing, and what the pressure that they're under.
The World Cup, right? The reaction of what happened after the English players
Euros.
Yeah.
That's pressure, right? But that's why you play. That's the game. If you didn't want that, you wouldn't be playing at that level. You'd be playing rec league, and just having fun with your friends, and after have a beer, and that's what you do. You wouldn't be making the money you make at it. You choose to do that because you want to strive for that greatness, to challenge for that position. We all do in our respective jobs, in people who have goals and ambitions. We want to do it, and we deal with the tension and the problems that come with it, and the stress. And we could be at work and we're stressed because but we get through it because that's part of the grind of doing it. We don't just succumb and say, for my mental health, I'm not going to work today. I'm not going to have my restaurant. I'm not going to work. I'm not going to go and or make the order of vegetables.
It does happen though in society that people need a break from work.
Again, you need, right. So when is the break? In the middle of the competition? When is it when the restaurant opens and you're in the middle of work, that's when you need the break? No, you take it before it happens, before you open. But again, like, it's so easy to sit back and just say that. And I don't know, I'm sure no matter what I've said here, there's going to be people that will criticize it and say, this is it, you don't understand it. No, I don't understand it. I'm looking at it from a different set of eyes, saying you're on a world stage, you're competing, you're playing. That's what you've done your entire life. That's what you strive to do. And now you just say, no, I can't do it because of my mental health. Again, my question is, well, what happens to your mental health if you do compete? You lose? Like, is that it? You don't win? So what happens? That's the kind of questions that I kind of want to answer, of how do we quantify what is the necessities to do something for mental health.
Fair enough. We have about 15 minutes. Let's get to the professional ranks. But before we do so, there's still professional boxing going on. We know as well there's going to be some action, of course, this weekend. And if you're interested in placing a wager, whether it's boxing or other sports, you can do so, Mr. Anber, on which website?
Bet99.
That would be correct.
.com?
Bet99.com, Canada's newest online sportsbook and casino. While you're there, be sure to check out their player props, the bet builder, and their risk-free life bet bonuses. Pardon me. And Monsieur Anber, what would be the
best thing about this? And I know that Scully's going to be watching this and seeing this, and I know Frank's going to be watching and seeing this, because I give them the urge to want to go out and bet their money. Because if you use the code BOXING99,
that would be correct.
You use BOXING99. Bet99.com will match your wager up to $600 if you win. So you place a wager for 100, your pony comes in, you get an extra 100 from Bet99. Yo.
It's the sports welcome offer. If you use the code BOXING99, the sports welcome offer is a deposit match of 100% up to $600, as you've explained, Russ. And eventually, one of the fights that people are going to want to place a wager, I'm sure, is when Canelo returns to the ring. But right now, there's a bit of confusion as to when that will actually take place. Everybody assumed that the Caleb Plant fight would get made at 168 pounds as Canelo continues to try to get all the belts in that division. And he's been very active, Canelo. But now the reports came out from ESPN's Mike Coppinger, a friend of ours, who's saying that the talks have kind of reached an impasse. Eddie Hearn is saying, look, it could still happen, but September is looking less and less likely as we're less than 2 months away from the date. Canelo can afford, financially, he can afford from a career break to not fight in September. He's been very active for a number one fighter, pound for pound, in the cash cow in boxing outside of the heavyweight division. But what do you make of it? Do you think if Caleb Plant is not the guy, do you think this opens the door for potentially one of your fighters that you work with, Artur Beterbiev, that the massive diehard, boxing fans probably want to see more than any other fight for Canelo? Do you think it's Dimitri Bivol? Do you think David Benavidez steps in? What would you like to see happen, or what do you make of this situation?
I'd like to see a unified champion. I'd like to see,
At 168?
At 168. The fight that should happen is the Caleb Plant fight. The fact that it's not happening and you cannot negotiate a fight like that in what would be the most lucrative fight of your career just doesn't make sense. You cannot, there's something that's called, in the world of sport, there's something that's called the golden rule. And you know what the golden rule is, Matthew?
In sports compared to regular life golden rule?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, actually, it probably applies in life as well. The golden rule is whoever has the gold makes the rules. And
yeah, I don't think that's how I was taught the golden rule in ethics. I thought it was don't do to others what you don't want to happen to yourself, or something along those lines.
But that's the way it is when you're in a sport that, like boxing, that's generated by ticket sales and who the participants are. And when you're the cash cow, like you said, you get to make those rules. You earn that privilege and that right to make those rules. Because if it wasn't for you, opponent B would never be in a position to be making the money you're making. And sadly, if you, opponent B, were able to generate that same kind of revenue and command that same power, well, fighter A, in this case Canelo, would have to succumb to what you want. But you don't generate that. And I know you want to try to be fair and get your guy the best deal, and you're not hurting. The only thing you're hurting Canelo is for him is just the title of him saying, I'm the unified champion. That's the only thing you're depriving him of saying. It's so much your own ego of saying that, because you're not hurting him for money. Because if he doesn't fight you, he's going to fight somebody else and he's going to make the same amount of money. He could fight the janitor and make the same money. And he's going to call the shots because he's the one in charge. It's his show. It's his money. He's the guy that brings the asses to the seats and generates the revenue. So I hope Eddie's able to pull it off. I hope Eddie can make it work. If there's somebody who's capable of making that happen, it would be Eddie. So, but it should be done. I mean, it's not a case where you have two fighters who are of equal popularity. Would that be the word?
Canelo and Caleb Plant?
Yeah.
I don't think they're equal.
That's what I'm saying. You don't have a case of two fighters who are of equal drawing power, of equal revenue makers, for you to be calling the shots that you want to call. So, but
it's ambiguous a little bit as to what the exact reason for the impasse is, because I'll read what Caleb Plant's statement was
in
regards to the negotiations. So I'll just, he says that there's never usually a rematch for title unification fights, which is accurate. But he said, look, they asked for a rematch. No problem. You can have the rematch as well. I just want to fight Caleb Plant. This is according to Caleb Plant. Pardon me. This is according to him. And he also says, I question whether legacy or money is their real motive. Speaking of the Canelo camp, we've been waiting for him to get done with his wedding, shooting his TV show, his golf tournaments, and now have tried to give him everything he wants and more to make this fight. So if you, based on what Plant's saying, it doesn't look like he's to blame, but we're not hearing much from Canelo's side.
There was another thing that I saw that followed that quote about if Plant got injured, Canelo would be free to fight somebody else. But if Canelo got injured, Plant would have to wait for the fight.
But again, it's going to be a bigger payday probably for him to wait than to fight someone else.
Exactly. And that's the one who has the title, because what happens then is right now you're Canelo is in the position where he's trying to buy the fighters, give them the payday to get into the ring with him. You almost have to wonder that, the IBF should say, if you've received a bona fide offer and you refuse to accept it for a unified title, then we're going to strip you of the title, and we're going to make, let Canelo fight somebody else for the vacant title. But again, that's the politics of boxing, which is often, very disheartening, but it should be a no-brainer that Caleb Plant, we talk about him defend his title against Canelo, but it's not just defending, fighting for Canelo's titles as well. It's not that it's only his title on the line. Canelo's titles are on the line as well. And in an opportunity which everybody strives for in boxing, to put yourself in a position to get the biggest payday possible that you could get. And I'd like to think that if the offer was unjust to Caleb Plant, it would be very easy to say, this is all they offered me. And we're not hearing that. So you have to think that the offer should have been at least fair market value for what the fight will generate, and more than any other fight he would be able to get.
Yeah. So let's look at Caleb Plant, Canelo it's the last super middleweight unification fight available for Canelo. Now, Benavidez wants to stay at 168, lost his title on the scales, trying to earn it back. He's having a fight at the end of August. So he's probably, unless he pulls out of that fight to get the Canelo fight, which would make business sense, he's already in training camp. But let's say it's not one of those two guys at 168. 175 is Bivol and Beterbiev. Now, Beterbiev is in his mid to late 30s. Do you think we'll end up seeing at one point Canelo fight Arthur Beterbiev, granted being a fight that it's for a belt, for two belts actually, in the 175-pound division? It's also a fight that massive interest from the hardcore boxing fans who think maybe Arthur presents the biggest challenge for Canelo right now available in boxing. Or do you think Canelo, because it's not a big name for Arthur, he doesn't bring the marketing aspect, even probably less so than Plant or Benavidez does, do you think we don't see that fight ever happening? Like, what would you think the percentages of that fight taking place at some point in both of their careers, a Canelo-Beterbiev clash?
Matt, I don't know. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, right? I don't know.
Do you think they'll wait as long as they can because of, and hope Arthur ages?
I don't know if it has really anything to do with that. I think it's going to be about when he wants to make the move to 75 and then stay there. I don't know that he's going to want to go up. He might, go up, win it, prove how good he is, and then come back down to 68.
He did it with Kovalev, although Kovalev was a bit past his prime at the time.
That's why that's what stopped me in my tracks when I said that was, he could go up, win it just be for fun and come down. Thinks it might be an easy fight. I think in terms of fans who want to see boxing, the media who wants to write about boxing, it's hard not to be able to sell with conviction Beterbiev versus Canelo. It would be so easy to sell that fight, that you got a fighter who has 100% knockout ratio with an extensive amateur career, successful as a pro, trains, and proof of this is out there everywhere, that he trains like an animal. So even if he was put into a situation where Callum Smith was put into, where, he only had 5 weeks notice for the fight, and took it anyways, but was training and getting ready, Arthur could take it at any time and be this close to his peak performance because he always is training.
Okay, Mark Ramsey and John Scully are the trainers and friends of yours. Do you think if Canelo calls tomorrow and says September, can Beterbiev take the fight, you think they take it?
I don't know. That's I'd like to think yes, because I think he's there. I think he has to.
But we know Mark a little bit. Mark Ramsey, he's not a big fan of short training camps for a big fight.
No, he's not. But he also knows that he's got the pony, and he also knows that he's got a shot at winning, and we also know that it's going to be the more lucrative payday. So you say no to this one? Well, you're going to fight for. I think you could even say you're going to fight for less than half in your next fight. Like that's the disparity difference.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree. And especially now that Joe Smith's out of the picture, which would have made sense for Top Rank to put together. But now with the fact that Joe Smith's going in a different direction, it's not like Arthur has a ton of options financially, I mean, for
Yeah,
marketable
and what you
fights.
spoke earlier, there has to be somebody that, I think the Bivol fight, the Bivol fight is the fight for Arthur. That's the, an all Russian matchup in Moscow, or was it,
Yeah,
or Yekaterinburg. I mean, this is an all Russian matchup that will gravitate boxing fans and the Russian fans to that fight. Like that would be massive.
that's the Top Rank DAZN issue again, though, I
Correct.
think we run
Correct.
into
That
in the
would be
networks.
the great fight. But in terms of money, it would pale in comparison compared to what Beterbiev could potentially make fighting Canelo. So, like I said, it's part of the golden rule, isn't it? Canelo calls the shots,
Calls the shots.
and Mayweather called the shots. And if you wanted to fight Mayweather, these were the conditions that you were going to fight Mayweather under. If you wanted to fight
De La
Roy,
Hoya before.
and I've been there, with Otis Grant, so I know that, in the case with Roy Jones, this is what was offered. Yeah, but can't we get more? Hey, you're getting 5 times more than you ever got before. So it is more, and it's not good. You're not going to get that with somebody else. So that's what we're buying that right, for us to control the show. And that's what they do. And it's the way boxing always has been. Like this is not something new. The guy who's the cash cow dictates. And whether it's, and that I think happens not only on the world scene, but that could happen locally. The local fighter who draws tickets and who sells tickets and who fights locally, even if it's at club level, the promoters want to use that kid and they pay him more than they pay all the others. Why? Because he puts more asses in those seats. So it's the way boxing is at the highest denominator, okay? Like it's at the highest multiple for a guy like Canelo or Pacquiao, or Mayweather back in the day. That's the way the sport works. And you have to kind of go along with it, do the best you can to get yourself in the best position you can be in, but you want to fight the guy. That's why every time somebody would fight and someone would put a microphone in their face, the first thing they do is call out Pacquiao or they call out Mayweather. That's the first thing they did. You know why? Because you know that, even under the worst negotiations, you're going to get more money from that than from another fight.
And it's prize fighting and there's no retirement funds and you got to have to make, the best living you can while you have a chance. So no fault there. And I just want to put maybe to rest because you work with Arthur, but people on my feeds and on social media, I'm seeing Canelo is afraid of Arthur. He can't win that fight. Look, I think we both agreed that Canelo is not afraid of anyone. Maybe his camp is a little bit hesitant in the matchups, but it would probably be a very close fight on paper. I don't think Beterbiev has a strength advantage. He has the power advantage. But Canelo, the way defensively he's improved and the way he seems to be carrying power at the different weight classes, it's a very much of a toss-up fight going in, wouldn't you think?
Yeah, I think it's. I think my biggest fear when handling fighters, when we were looking at opponents, at potential opponents, my biggest fear was not facing fighters that we had a difficult time hitting, and I learned that from day one in boxing when I was brought in, and believed I could be a good trainer and was endorsed. Vinny Curto gave me the belief that I could be a trainer and really take care of fighters. And he's the guy who proved to me that, defense beats punching power all the time. Punching power happens every now and then, but over the long stretch, over a career of, 50 pro fights back in those days, guys were doing that, Duran survived all that time because Duran was so hard to hit. He was so hard to nail. That's why he could get by guys, and he could punch, of course. But being able to have great defense, as Ali proved at his best, as Floyd Mayweather proved at his best, as Robinson proved at his best. The guys with great D had the best careers, had the most success. It's very few and far between guys who had bad defense who became great fighters. That doesn't happen.
Ali towards the end, it wasn't much the defense, it was the chin.
Yeah, but that wasn't Ali's greatness. That wasn't the greatness of Ali. Even back at Larry Holmes, Larry Holmes was so difficult to hit, and that's the thing that worries me the most. Of course, Beterbiev has that debilitating power, literally one punch knockout power. Like one shot could end it. when I was in the corner with Canelo, I've been against him twice.
Yeah, Callum Smith, right?
Twice, yeah. Well, I was with Liam and with Canelo. The punching power he showed in the Callum Smith fight was double what he showed against Liam Smith.
Yeah,
double. Like, I mean, the right up close, watching him fire away like that, and the defense. Liam hit Canelo way more than Callum did, you know, and the defense was just, you know, impenetrable. Like, I mean, he was just, you know, boom, 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 slipping. He was like an old school guy. It was like watching what Vinny Curto used to do when, you know, a short middleweight making all these big guys miss shots just by moving his head and staying away. Unbelievable. And I have all the, you know, respect in the world how Canelo's game has evolved. And Arthur Beterbiev, you know, we'll say, oh, he better be ready. Arthur Beterbiev is always ready. And he will come into this fight convinced he's going to win. And that's the exact mindset he has to have. But he's up against great, great opposition. And I would even venture to say, and I think anybody who disagrees with this is really just hating, an all-time great in Canelo. And he is an all-time great who would have competed and been successful in any era of boxing.
Very well said. In closing, let me ask you this, because of Canelo clenbuterol tests in the past, his positive test for clenbuterol, which we know now, of course, the Mexican meat, tainted beef, is the reason that was given. Would you would you make it a deal breaker that additional drug testing randomly would have to take place for you to, you know, for the Beterbiev camp to take the fight against Canelo? Or would you take your chances because of the golden rule? Again, you're saying, look, even if he doesn't want it, we got to take the fight anyways and roll the dice.
That's the thing. If he's going to make the conditions,
No, but I'm saying, would you be in the camp? Would you say, okay, deal breaker, we're not taking the fight if we can get additional drug testing? Or would you say, listen, we got to take our chances here?
I can't comment on that and speak for Arthur. Like, I can't. I don't want to speak for Mark or Arthur.
I had to ask.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, it's a good question to ask, but I think at the end of the day, I think the answer is you don't have much of a choice. You either don't take the fight, you're ready to walk away. And Arthur is a man of conviction, a man of principle. When he asks for something or wants something, he doesn't care about the money. It doesn't matter. He has he's a devout Muslim and has a strong belief in what's right and what's wrong. And if he believes something's right, all the money in the world is not going to make him change his mind. Now, from a managerial perspective, you know, with another fighter, not Arthur, you're in a position sometimes where you say, yeah, I want you to do this testing. And they say, no, we're not doing that. Well, I'm not fighting. Okay, no problem. Next.
Yeah.
And you're sat there. What do you mean next? No, wait, no. I want to fight. Well, don't come to the table, you know, making threats when you don't have a leg to stand on. And that's sadly the way boxing is, unfortunately.
Listen, Russ, we'll get to the Crawford-Porter fight down the road. We have time on a future podcast. We'll get to the drug testing stuff, but we went over. Flew by. We're closing the hour mark here again on another edition of Calling Russ Anber. You have a flight tomorrow. You got to finish packing. Any final words, final thoughts here?
Well, listen, I'm excited about going. I hope I'm going to be really looking forward to being able to do this, you know, from Ireland. This is going to be, this will be our first international one, right? Have we done an international broadcast?
I believe we did. We've done one from the Russian pool hall once.
We did what?
From your pool hall in Russia for the Arthur.
Yeah. That's right. We did do it. Okay, it's not going to be a first, but it'll be a first from Belfast.
That would be correct. Yeah, Belfast, and I don't know if McGregor will be dropping by. I don't know.
And Matthew, I hope I'll be able to do it from the snooker club in Belfast as well.
That'd be pretty cool, and hopefully we'll try to get Jamie Conlon on, the brother of Mick Conlon, of course, who has a big say in the career of Mick. So, Russ, thank you again. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll be with you next week, as Russ says, live from Belfast.
God willing, from Belfast. Thanks, brother.